Rear Admiral Thompson's polished shoes clicked against the hot pavement at Naval Station Norfolk. The thick air carried salt and jet fuel as excitement buzzed through the crowd gathered for the fleet's big commissioning ceremony. Sailors in white uniforms, families waving small flags, and important guests created a wave of patriotic energy everywhere you looked. But the Admiral's icy stare locked onto one specific person. A disruption in his flawlessly planned event, the quiet female security officer manning the VIP entrance. "I don't have time for this nonsense," he snapped, his tone cutting through the noise around them. "This is General Miller. His papers are perfect. Your equipment isn't working right. Wave him through." The woman wore a basic navy polo and tan pants. She didn't react to his sharp words. Instead, she raised one hand calmly, following standard procedure. "Sir, I understand, but the rules say I need visual verification from command when the digital reader fails. It'll just take a quick moment." Thompson's expression turned stormy. People nearby went quiet, watching. The woman wasn't being disrespectful, but in the Admiral's mind, a civilian contractor making him wait was completely unacceptable. He didn't see her as a professional doing her job. He saw an obstacle in his path. He moved closer, speaking in a poisonous whisper that others could still catch. "Your role here is to help things move smoothly, not block them. Step out of the way right now, or I'll make sure you're banned from this base forever." Heavy silence followed his threat. Only a distant seagull broke the quiet. The woman held her position, eyes steady, waiting for the confirmation through her earpiece. "Before we continue, hit that subscribe button for military and veteran stories so you catch every inspiring tale we share. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from today." Her name was Evelyn Reed, though the security team simply called her Evie. At 42, she was a familiar but barely noticed presence at the base. She seemed designed to fade into the background. Average height and build, with alert brown-green eyes and dark hair always tied back in a practical style. She only spoke when needed. Every movement she made was precise and efficient, with an unusual stillness that younger coworkers sometimes mistook for shyness. The base operated on strict rankings, all shiny metal and pressed uniforms where your position meant everything. Evie wore no rank at all. As a civilian contractor, she was practically a shadow in the system. To people like Rear Admiral Thompson, she was completely invisible until she became inconvenient. Talk among junior officers and enlisted folks varied. Some thought her strangely intense, noticing how her eyes constantly swept around, catching details everyone else missed. Others just saw a lonely woman doing a thankless job, probably living quietly in some small apartment off base. They all got her wrong. They noticed her barely visible limp during long patrols and saw weakness. They heard her silence and thought she lacked confidence. They looked at her plain uniform and assumed she was simple. What they couldn't see was the steel discipline keeping her posture perfect, or the deep well of experience behind her calm face. Everything about her was a contradiction. Soft-spoken but firm, reserved but constantly watchful. She always arrived first in the mornings, her locker arranged with perfect order. Her lunch never changed, a basic sandwich and an apple. She avoided workplace gossip, choosing instead to read a beat-up paperback during breaks. The cover was long gone, pages worn soft from endless readings. On her wrist sat a single plain silver band, dulled with time. It was the only personal touch in an otherwise bare existence, a quiet reminder of a life beyond the naval base. But nobody ever asked about it. Nobody asked about her past at all. To everyone there, she was just Evie, the quiet guard at the entrance, a minor footnote in the huge, busy story of the United States Navy. And that seemed to be exactly what she wanted. The clash with Rear Admiral Thompson didn't come out of nowhere. It had been growing for weeks. Thompson was shaped by naval tradition, a surface warfare officer who believed in loud orders and instant obedience. He viewed everything as black or white, military or civilian, organized or chaotic. Evie, a civilian who carried herself with the quiet command of a seasoned soldier, was an ambiguity he couldn't stand. Their first major conflict happened a month earlier during a security briefing for an upcoming foreign dignitary visit. In a packed briefing room, Evie raised her hand. When acknowledged, she spoke in her typical measured voice. "Admiral, the planned motorcade path has a serious blind spot between the armory and Hangar 4. The watchtower there can't see almost 200 yards of that stretch." Thompson stared down at her from his position at the front, pure contempt on his face. He turned to the base's uniformed security chief. "Is what she's saying accurate?" The chief, a Navy master-at-arms, shifted awkwardly. "Sir, technically it is, but we consider the danger minimal." Thompson cut him off, looking back at Evie. "The danger is minimal," he repeated like he was speaking to a small child. Then he addressed everyone present. "Let's leave tactical analysis to those who actually serve in uniform." "Agreed?" Nervous laughter rippled through the assembled officers. Evie simply nodded, showing no emotion as she sat back down. But the security chief later quietly changed the route, proving her observation right without ever publicly acknowledging it. The second clash was more direct. Thompson was jogging his regular 5-mile loop around the base when he spotted Evie carefully examining the chain-link fence near the back entrance. She was running her fingers along the support cable, completely focused. He slowed down, sweaty and annoyed. "Everything meeting your standards, contractor?" he asked, dripping with sarcasm. "The cable shows rust damage near this support post, sir," she answered without glancing up. "And the ground here feels softer than the surrounding earth. Could be a potential breach location." Thompson laughed dismissively. "I've been jogging this path for a decade. The fence is perfectly fine. Return to your assigned position and stop creating problems." He jogged away, leaving her standing there. The following day, someone anonymously submitted a maintenance request to reinforce that exact fence section. The issue was fixed, but the Admiral's contempt for her only deepened. He viewed her skill not as valuable but as a quiet threat to his control. This led them to the commissioning ceremony, where his resentment reached its peak. After being made to wait for the credential check, which naturally proved Evie right and revealed a paperwork error on the general's documents, Thompson was furious. He saw her not just as annoying but as a source of public shame. He decided to put her in her place once and for all. As the ceremony was about to begin, a group of important guests arrived late. They were Navy SEALs fresh from a difficult deployment in the Middle East, their desert uniforms contrasting sharply with the Navy's white dress outfits. They'd come to receive a unit honor. As they reached the checkpoint, now staffed by someone else, Admiral Thompson saw his opportunity. He marched over to Evie, who was directing foot traffic away from the VIP seating. He stopped right in front of her, blocking her path. The crowd sensed confrontation and started watching from the corners of their eye. "I thought I was clear earlier," Thompson started, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your job is to observe and follow orders. You're a civilian, a temporary worker. You don't have authority to delay a 2-star general, and you definitely don't have authority to manage personnel on my base." The laughter that followed his earlier remarks was gone. Now there were only hushed voices. Sailors and their families watched with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity on their faces. What would you have done in her position, facing down a powerful man's anger in front of hundreds of witnesses? Evie simply met his stare. "My apologies, Admiral. I was making sure there was a clear path for the honor guard." Her calm, respectful response only seemed to anger him more. "I'm the one who gives orders here. Your contract is with base security, but whether you stay on this dock is my decision. And right now, my decision is that you're a problem. I want you off this dock immediately. Report to your supervisor and tell him you've been removed from duty. Do you understand?" The public humiliation was complete. He wasn't just scolding her. He was firing her in front of everyone. The whispers stopped, replaced by shocked, heavy silence. As Evelyn Reed turned to follow the Admiral's harsh command, a strong wind from the harbor swept across the dock. It pushed up the sleeve of her navy polo past her elbow for just a brief moment. For the handful of people standing close enough, the sight was startling. Running up her forearm was a thick, rough scar, a web of puckered, discolored tissue that told the story of a violent, traumatic injury. It wasn't the neat line of a surgery. It was the messy mark of shattered metal or a powerful impact wound. A nearby chief petty officer, a man who'd witnessed plenty of combat injuries in Fallujah, instantly recognized what he was seeing. He frowned, eyes narrowing, and thought that wasn't from any kitchen accident. Evie quickly tugged her sleeve down, her movements smooth and practiced, but the image burned into the minds of those who caught it. As she began her humiliating walk away from the VIP area, she passed a Marine gunnery sergeant standing guard near the ceremonial platform. Her head stayed high, her bearing showing none of the shame she must have felt inside. As she walked by, her collar shifted slightly. For just a second, the gunny glimpsed the edge of a tattoo on her upper back just below her neckline. It wasn't a flower or an inspirational phrase. It was two sharp black ink lines, the unmistakable tips of a bird of prey's claw. It was a familiar aggressive symbol often linked to elite flying units. He knew he'd seen it somewhere before, but the situation didn't make sense. What was a design like that doing on a civilian security guard? Meanwhile, the late-arriving Navy SEALs were being checked through the entrance. Their leader, a tall lieutenant commander with the quiet, dangerous grace of a career warrior, watched Evie walk away. He noticed the Admiral's smug look and the pitying glances from the crowd, but his attention stayed on the woman herself. He studied how she walked, the controlled efficiency of her movements, the straightness of her spine. Even with the slight limp, she moved with an intention that felt deeply familiar to him. He narrowed his eyes, a spark of recognition flashing in his mind. He leaned toward his Master Chief, a battle-worn veteran with a chest covered in medals. "Chief," he whispered quietly, "look at that woman, the one the Admiral just dismissed." The Master Chief's gaze followed his direction. "The security guard? Yeah, rough situation." "No," the commander said, tension rising in his voice. "Look at her. Really study her. Do you recognize her at all?" The Master Chief watched her for another long moment and shook his head. The commander's eyes stayed locked on Evie's departing figure. He whispered a single word, a name, not Evelyn, but a call sign, spoken with a combination of amazement and disbelief. "Wraith." Just as Evelyn was about to pass the last row of spectators and vanish from sight, a sudden sharp screech of twisting metal tore through the air. A heavy lighting structure positioned dangerously on a mobile platform near the main stage suffered a catastrophic hydraulic breakdown. With a sickening tilt, the entire assembly began toppling, its several-ton weight falling directly toward a section of bleachers packed with sailors, families, and young children. Panic exploded. A collective scream rose from the crowd as people fought to escape. Uniformed personnel, including Admiral Thompson, froze for a crucial second, their brains struggling to understand the disaster unfolding before them. It was in that brief moment of chaos that Evelyn Reed changed completely. The quiet, unremarkable security guard disappeared. In her place stood a leader. Her voice, no longer soft or controlled, burst out with a force that seemed impossible for her size. It was a voice forged in the thunder of jet engines and the pressure of life-or-death moments. "Brace and cover," she roared, the command slicing through the panic like a blade. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order filled with absolute, instinctive authority. As people automatically dropped or protected their loved ones, she moved. Her limp vanished, replaced by a brutally efficient stride. She didn't flee from danger. She ran alongside it, her eyes calculating where the falling structure would land with a pilot's spatial understanding. "VIPs against the ship wall. Stage right," she shouted, pointing toward the solid steel hull of a nearby vessel. Her instructions were exact, clear, and immediate. She spotted two young sailors frozen with terror and pointed straight at them. "You two. Get the children out now. Use that maintenance passage." Her finger jabbed toward an access route nobody else had even spotted. The sailors, jolted from their shock by the pure force of her command, instantly obeyed. Their training kicked in as they started guiding families to safety. The lighting structure crashed down with a thunderous boom, its metal arms crushing into the bleachers just moments after the last family scrambled away. It landed precisely where she'd predicted. The immediate threat was over, but the dock was in chaos. Through everything, everyone from the newest seaman to Admiral Thompson himself simply stood there, completely stunned. The woman he'd just publicly fired and dismissed as a rent-a-cop had just seized decisive control of a potential mass casualty event, evaluated the danger, issued clear commands, and coordinated an evacuation in roughly 5 seconds. She'd moved with a level of tactical skill and chilling composure that most career officers spend their entire lives trying to reach. The SEAL team, who'd been moving to help, stopped and watched her work. They didn't see a civilian contractor. They saw a fellow operator, a professional moving with an expert's deadly precision. The lieutenant commander's suspicion crystallized into certainty. He knew exactly who he was looking at. The legend was standing right there. As the dust settled and the initial shock faded, a stunned silence blanketed the dock. Base personnel and emergency responders began moving in, but the immediate crisis had been stopped, thanks entirely to the swift actions of one woman. Admiral Thompson stood frozen, his face showing disbelief and confusion. He looked at the twisted pile of metal, at the now safe families, and then at Evelyn Reed, who was calmly checking on a small child who'd fallen during the scramble. The SEAL lieutenant commander didn't wait for permission. He walked purposefully through the stunned crowd, his path direct and unwavering. He moved past junior officers, past decorated captains, and directly past the still frozen Admiral Thompson. He stopped about 3 feet in front of Evie, his entire team falling into formation behind him. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her with deep professional respect. He noticed the scar on her arm, now clearly visible, and the intense focus in her eyes. The authority she'd just displayed still surrounded her like an energy field. Admiral Thompson, finally finding his voice, marched over, his face red with a mixture of anger and confusion. "What on earth is happening here, Commander? Who is this woman?" The SEAL commander never took his eyes off Eve. His voice was quiet, yet it traveled with perfect clarity across the silent dock. "Admiral," he began, his tone carrying a respect that somehow also served as a correction. "I believe you know who she is, you just don't know what she is." He then turned his head slightly toward the Admiral. "Sir, with complete respect, you're addressing Major Evelyn Reed, United States Air Force, retired." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. An Air Force major working here as a security guard? It made no sense. The commander let the rank sink in before revealing the final, earth-shattering detail. He looked back at Evie, his expression pure reverence. "Her call sign," he said, his voice dropping lower, filled with the weight of legend, "is Wraith." The name struck the air and seemed to hover there, shimmering and lethal. Wraith. For the aviators and special operators in the crowd, the name was mythological. Wraith wasn't just any pilot. Major Wraith Reed was a ghost, a whispered legend of one of the first and most decorated female F-22 Raptor pilots. A trailblazer who flew secret missions over enemy territory. A pilot with more confirmed combat hours in the advanced fighter than nearly anyone. A recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross for an action that remained classified to this day. She'd disappeared from service years ago after a devastating high-altitude ejection that rumor said had almost killed her. They said she'd never walk again, much less fly. And now here she stood in a security polo on a Navy dock. The silence was no longer shocked. It was sacred. Without another word, the SEAL commander's back went perfectly straight. He brought his hand up in a salute so sharp, so exact, it seemed to cut the air itself. It wasn't the routine salute given to a superior officer. It was the salute a warrior gives to a hero. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it's an absolute honor." The commander's salute acted as a signal. Instantly, his entire team of battle-hardened Navy SEALs snapped to attention, their hands cracking against their foreheads in perfect synchronized respect. The sound echoed in the stillness. The Marine gunnery sergeant who'd seen the Raptor Talon tattoo finally understood. The symbol belonged to the F-22 community. His posture straightened and he executed a flawless salute of his own. Across the dock, The chain reaction was immediate and overwhelming. An Army colonel, a guest of the new ship's captain, saluted. The Air Force veterans in the crowd, men and women who'd only heard stories of the legendary Wraith, came to attention, their eyes wide with disbelief and awe. Then the sailors themselves began saluting. From the young seamen on crowd control to the seasoned command master chiefs, a wave of respect washed over the assembly. The sea of white uniforms became a forest of salutes, all directed at the quiet woman in tan pants. They weren't saluting a security guard, they were saluting a warrior who'd walked from the sky and was standing among them. Rear Admiral Thompson was the last to move. He stood there utterly paralyzed, his entire worldview having been completely shattered. The woman he'd insulted, belittled, and publicly humiliated was a decorated combat veteran, a hero from a sister service whose reputation far exceeded his own. The shame that flooded him was a physical sensation, hot and suffocating. He saw the hundreds of salutes not as a challenge to his power, but as a judgment of his character. Slowly, deliberately, as if lifting tremendous weight, Admiral Thompson raised his own hand to his forehead. His salute was stiff, formal, and held far longer than rules required. In that single silent gesture, he conveyed a profound and deeply felt apology, an admission of his own arrogance, and an offering of the highest respect he could give. The air on the dock was thick with the unspoken truth. True honor isn't demanded by rank, but earned through courage. And in that moment, all the authority on the dock belonged to the quiet woman in the security contractor's uniform. Evelyn Wraith Reed didn't bask in the moment. The sea of salutes, the silent awe-filled stares, it all made her deeply uncomfortable. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent years avoiding. She held their gaze briefly, her expression unreadable, before giving the SEAL commander a single short nod. It was a gesture of mutual understanding and respect from one warrior to another, and it was all that was needed. As the salutes lowered, Admiral Thompson approached her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by deep and genuine humility. His face was pale, his voice strained. "Major Reed," he began, stumbling over the name. I don't know what to say. My behavior was inexcusable. There's no apology sufficient for the disrespect I showed you." Evie looked at him, her brown-green eyes holding no trace of anger or satisfaction. She saw not an admiral, but a man humbled by his own error. "We all have a job to do, Admiral," she said, her voice returning to its normal quiet tone. "Today mine was this checkpoint. That's all that matters. Please attend to your guests." She then turned and began helping the first responders check on the families in the bleacher. Her duty-focused mindset immediately re-engaged. She was already moving forward. The story of what happened on the dock that day spread across Naval Station Norfolk like wildfire. It became a lesson whispered in briefing rooms and retold in dining hall. It was a story about the unremarkable security guard who was once a legend in the sky. It was a powerful reminder that the greatest heroes are often the ones who seek no glory, the quiet professionals who continue serving long after they've removed the uniform. Major Evelyn Reed's story isn't one of superhuman strength or impossible achievements. It's a testament to the quiet dignity of service. It teaches us that courage isn't measured by the rank on a shoulder or the volume of a voice. It's measured in the calm resolve to do what's right. Whether you're flying a $100 million fighter jet at the edge of space, or simply standing your post at a gate, her life is a profound lesson to us all. Look beyond the surface. Honor the silent warriors who walk among us, and never ever underestimate the person standing watch. The quiet heroes, the ones who ask for nothing and give everything, are the true backbone of our nation. Their stories of sacrifice and silent strength deserve to be told, to be remembered, and to be honored. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran content. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.